What's up guys, welcome back to Deck Tech for Decks. Today we're building Greasefang. Let me give you a scenario. Turn 2 we're going to discard the Reaver Titan. Turn 3 we cast our commander, reanimate the Reaver Titan, and then we can crew it up with our commander. Now as soon as turn 3 someone's taking 15 damage. Let me give you one more scenario on that. Turn 4 we go ahead and discard the Reaver Titan again, reanimate it again, but now after combat we're going to drop Sculpting Steel. Boom, we have a Reaver Titan that never leaves the battlefield that we paid 3 mana for. Greasefang can just do nutty stuff like this, so let's get right into the deck tech after we shout out the patrons. Irrelevant, you rock. Additionally, if you guys want a free $15, you can click on that whatnot link in the description down below. Helps out the channel, you get free money. Additionally, liking, commenting, and subscribing helps out the channel a ton, so if you're enjoying these deck lists, I really appreciate if you pump up the algorithm. Now, let's get into what Greasefang wants to do. Again, we're just trying to discard all of these high-costed artifacts, put them in the graveyard, and then I noticed something. The higher cost the vehicle is, the actual less it is to crew it. So Greasefang can crew 90% of these vehicles by himself without needing any additional help. But if we do get additional help, which we will need because I'm kind of greedy, I want to reanimate more than just one creature, so we are going to add in effects that double up Greasefang's ability. That way we're getting multiple vehicles instead of just one, because I want this deck to hit, and I want it to hit hard. So to do that, we need to play stuff like Strionic Resonator to reanimate 2 vehicles again instead of just one. And then we're going to play cards like this. I forget its name, it escapes me, never heard of it before, but it's going to be solid here. Whenever a vehicle enters the battlefield, we pay 2 and boom, we get another version of that vehicle. So now, not only are we reanimating the vehicles for free, we're also doubling up on them, right? Because now we're able to generate a token copy of it every time it enters the battlefield, and we can consistently discard it and reanimate it using Greasefang and other discard outlets in the deck. Notably, the key to this deck working is getting a discard outlet online, hopefully before our commander hits the battlefield. So that's why I included a lot of them. Ideally, we want to see a discard outlet, 3 mana, and then a broken artifact we can put in the graveyard for our commander to reanimate. Don't be keeping a handful of janky 7-drop vehicles and saying, this deck doesn't work. No, shame on you. Be careful with your mulligans. We need those discard outlets for this deck to do literally anything. That's why there is a high density of them. They might seem a little redundant, but without them, the deck doesn't work in the early game, and the early game is when these aggro lists really need to start chipping away at people's life totals. That way we can take out all 3 opponents and win the game. We also get to run some really cool cards like Imhotep the Stormlord and our card the Traveler. This will allow us to just straight up reanimate those vehicles, put them onto the battlefield, and we're going to start smashing face, and then Imhotep is going to generate an army whenever we're reanimating those vehicles. That way we can instantly tap those army of Necrons to crew the vehicles, because ideally we do want more than just one broken vehicle. So late game, Imhotep is going to be a solid piece to not only prevent our opponents from attacking into us because we have a giant army of blockers, but additionally it's something else to crew the vehicles. So guys, if you guys want to smash face with this giant vehicle army, let's get into the deck tech. Let's kick it off by talking about the fun vehicles we get to run. The Reaver Titan is going to be amazing here. It's a 10/10 that has protection from mana value 3 or less, so it's going to be basically unblockable in the early game, and then additionally it does 5 damage to each opponent whenever it attacks. Getting multiple copies of this will result in you winning the game very quickly. Knight Paladin is very flexible as well, because whenever it enters the battlefield, we get to deal 4 damage to each opponent, so another way we can really start pressuring life totals while hitting someone in the face with a 6/6. Thunderhawk Gunship, Perhelion 2, and Necron Monolith are all very useful vehicles that not only hit like trucks, but additionally they're going to generate a board state, and we can use that board state to not only attack our opponents, but additionally crew our vehicles. I also like the fact that they all had some added utility that's pretty good. Thunderhawk Gunship's going to make it to where attacking creatures have flying. Necron Monolith is going to mill us a little bit, which this deck likes as well. The more vehicles in the graveyard, the more vehicles we can reanimate. These are just solid here. Rolling Hamsphere is going to be another vehicle that's going to be insane once we start making copies of it. If we get multiples of these on the battlefield, we're just going to start making double the hamsters, dealing double the damage, and these Rolling Hamspheres are going to be massive. The Steel Flagship is also perfect in this deck. It's going to make 2/2 White Knight creature tokens, but they're going to get +2/+2 whenever an artifact enters the battlefield, which is happening every turn very consistently. So now we're generating reanimating a ton of 4/4 creatures that again is just going to allow us to pressure our opponent's life total very efficiently. Mighty Servant of Luiko, I don't know if I'm saying that right, kind of a weird name, but this is pretty solid here. We just crew it up with 2 creatures and we're able to draw 2 cards. We even get to play Aerial Surveyor. This guy's just going to make sure we're keeping up with those green players with all of the land drops they're making. Sky Sovereign Councilship, another solid way we can deal direct damage to target creatures. This is going to keep all of our opponent's key creatures off the battlefield, and it's going to be really solid because it actually triggers on ETB and whenever it attacks. So using our commander, it comes into the battlefield, we get 3 damage, it attacks, we get 3 damage, that's 6 damage. That's going to get rid of whatever we needed to get rid of, and then additionally it's just slapping someone for 6 damage in the face. The Weatherlight is perfect in this deck. It's just going to dig deep, find us all of our key vehicles, and put them directly into our hand. Then all we have to do is discard it, and boom, we're off to the races and reanimating our broken Reaver Titan effects. Nataloid Ship also has a really cool interaction with this commander because on ETB we get to exile target player's graveyard. Not only is this going to be effective graveyard hate, but additionally, since our commander is returning it to our hand and then we're discarding it to re-enter next turn, we can make sure that we exile every single opponent's graveyard. And then once we've done that, his second ability is going to be Broken. Whenever he deals combat damage to a player, you may put a creature exiled with him onto the battlefield under your control. So not only are we just getting rid of their good creatures that they're trying to reanimate, additionally, we're reanimating them ourselves. Lita is also amazing in this deck. At the beginning of your end step, she's going to untap all of your other artifact creatures, so that's going to untap all of our vehicles, allowing us to be able to not only attack with them, but block with them, and then she can create 5/5 colorless vehicles with Crew 3. So this is also going to be very good just to generate a massive board state of vehicles. The next key part to this deck is going to be our discard outlets. Putrid Imp and Olivia's Dragoon are going to be perfect here. I know they don't look impressive, but we really just want a discard outlet before we cast our commander to ensure that this deck is really working. Key to the City is also very solid here. You get your discard effect, and this can allow you to replace the card that you discard. You just have to pay 2 mana. Sometimes you'll do that, sometimes you don't, but the added flexibility is appreciated. Pit-Boy is kind of in a weird spot in this deck because yes, you can play it turn 1, but you can't equip it to your commander turn 2 because he's probably not on the battlefield. So this does mean that we're probably not discarding something with Pit-Boy until turn 4. A little slow, but I like it here because we can grab it with Urza Saga. This is just going to be another way we can make sure our opening hands have a smooth way to get a discard outlet into their hand. Smuggler's Copter is definitely in the same boat here. Yes, it's a solid discard outlet that happens turn 2, but we're probably not doing anything meaningful with it until turn 4. Tomb Robber, now we're getting into our more expensive ones, but these ones do have utility tacked onto them. I like this guy because he explores. This allows us to get more cards into our graveyard and more land cards into our hand. Rotting Regisaur just seemed funny in this deck to me. We just get to keep this 7/6 around, and then remember, our commander actually does return the vehicle back to our hand after we reanimate it, so we actually never run out of cards to discard. This means Rotting Regisaur can just sit on the battlefield and smack people in the face for 7. Armix Filigree Thrasher is another awkward one since he discards during combat, but the utility we get from him is too good, I had to include him. We're going to discard the vehicle that we're probably going to try to reanimate next turn with this guy, and then additionally, he's just going to start axing all of our opponent's key creatures off the battlefield. That's why we definitely want to play him here. The Great Door is kind of solid here. In the early game, we can draw some cards, discard some cards, and then we can actually transform it, and it's going to tap for a ton of mana in the late game, allowing us to just straight up hard cast our vehicles. The Celestis seems solid here. It's a mana rock if we don't need the discard effect, and then if we do need the discard effect that also draws us a card, it's there if we need it. I've been challenging myself to try to come up with new ways to incorporate our mana base, such as our mana rocks, into the strategy, and the Celestis is going to do that perfectly here. Argentum Masticore, also very funny. At the beginning of your upkeep, sacrifice Argentum Masticore unless you discard a card. When you discard a card this way, destroy target non-land permanent an opponent controls with mana value less than or equal to the mana value of the discarded card. We're discarding massive cards in this deck, so 9 times out of 10, this is just discard a card, the card you wanted to discard anyway, and destroy whatever is causing you an issue on your opponent's side of the battlefield. Oppression is probably not okay in this deck, but I think it's funny, so we're going to include it. Every time a player casts a spell, they have to discard a card. So if we just cast one spell, we just discard a massive vehicle, right? This also works for our opponents. So this is going to hose them over, and it's probably going to make us the threat, but in an aggro deck, it's definitely okay to be the threat. Lethal Schemes is a way we can use the massive board state we're generating off of our vehicles that generate creatures, and all of our Necrons that generate creatures as well, and then we're able to convoke and discard some cards while drawing some cards. Connive's very solid here. Ripples of Undeath isn't exactly a discard outlet, but it does come down turn 2, so it's ready to discard cards turn 3, which is where we need to be discarding cards into our graveyard, or sorry, milling cards. And then it does allow us to get our key pieces back by paying 1 mana, so it's kind of card advantage at the same time. This card just seems so good, I had to include it. Spymaster's Vault and Gaia's Reach Sanitarium are just super free here. They're lands that allow us to put cards into our graveyard, which is exactly what this deck wants to do. Bone Miser also seemed kind of free here. Now whenever we're discarding cards, we're getting a little bit of value off of them. Notably, whenever we're specifically discarding those vehicle cards, we get to draw a card. So he's turning all of our discard effects into looting effects. Moving on to the other key components of this strategy, we have Mirror Works. I really love this card. For 2 mana, we're just creating token copies of our most broken vehicles consistently every turn. Stronic Resonator and Lithoform Engine are very flexible here as well. They're just going to double up on our commander's activated ability, allowing us to put more vehicles into play. Notably, Lithoform Engine can also do some other janky stuff, but we need a lot of mana to make that happen, so just look at it as a plus and not really the goal, if that makes sense. Helm of the Host, another way to get more copies of our commander, that way we can start reanimating even more vehicles. This is also just a super flexible card. We're running some bombs in this deck, so putting Helm of the Host on something like Imhotep the Stormlord or Anarkar the Traveler is also going to be pretty broken. Another way we can get value out of our giant vehicles is just straight up sacrificing them. Something like Altar of the Wretched is going to draw us a ton of cards and mill us a ton of cards, which is going to be amazing. Ruthless Technomancer is going to generate a ton of treasure tokens. Illuminator Saras is also going to be solid here. It's going to allow us to sacrifice our giant vehicles to then hardcast our giant vehicles, which is very useful. Oswald Fiddlebender is just straight up a birthing pod for vehicles, so that's going to be solid here. I also want to point out Illustrious Wanderglyph and Imhotep the Stormlord. Not only do these two make a massive army that can crew up all the vehicles we want, additionally, Illustrious Wanderglyph is going to give all of our other artifact creatures +2/+2, which is going to be our vehicles as well, and Imhotep the Stormlord is going to give us a little bit of a combat buff as well. So they're just going to add to the aggro nature of this deck while doing exactly what we want to do. Anarkar the Traveler and Sarah Paragon, I really like these two here because they allow us to straight up get things back from our graveyard. We are putting a lot of stuff in our graveyard, and this is a way we can kind of turn it into card advantage instead of just straight up discard. Cyberman Squadron was too fun not to put in this deck. It's just going to give all of our vehicles Myriad as long as they're not legendary, and there's a lot of powerful things we can give Myriad here, right? Now, we aren't going to get any of our attack triggers from this, but all of the ETBs are fair game, and then additionally, just being able to attack every single opponent with a Reaver Titan at the same time is pretty broken and pretty fun at the same time. We can't forget our Entomb effects like Lively Dirge and Entomb to get whatever we need in the graveyard. I'm also going to run Semblance Anvil here since we're running a ton of artifacts. Just exiling some meaningless artifact under this and being able to cast our vehicles for 2 less mana is pretty massive, but that's going to do it for the end of the deck tech, guys. There's a lot in the list I didn't go over, so the link to the full list will be in the description down below. Now let's shout out those patrons. Excessum, Chicken Salad, Creator, The Professional Heal, and Irrelevant. You guys rock. I hope this helped you guys in your deck building endeavors, and I will see you in the next one.